Hi, so with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. Just before I go any further, you may hear a whole lot of parrots squawking. There's a whole bunch of parrots that's appeared on the back deck here, and they're squawking their asses off. So you'll hear that, and that's what that noise is. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the mass migration of illegals to Italy. Now, for those of you who don't know, there was a centre-right government was recently, or some months ago, nearly a year ago now, elected to Italy with Giorgia Meloni as the Prime Minister, and various members of the government have included those that are definitely wanting to stop illegal immigration and stop mass migration or reduce it to just skilled people. This, of course, was denounced by the globalist controlled media as being fascist and Nazi and Hitler and the usual stuff. So a lot of people had high hopes that the mass migration be reduced and the illegal migration, hopefully stopped altogether when this new government came in. The new government did take some or passed new laws and put new legislation in place, and but everything they've done appears to have been very ineffective. They've done a couple of showy things, like if the illegals do arrive, they send them to France, that sort of stuff. But really, the illegal migration has increased by 300% since this new government came in. So we've got, so we're led to believe, a government that's strongly and vigorously opposed to illegal immigration that somehow is utterly powerless and unable to prevent it. Now, the globalist media and the various NGO groups insist that the laws that the Italian government has brought out are the most draconian ever, the most brutal ever, the cruelest ever. It's illegal, it's bad, it's Hitler, it's Nazi, it's fascist, it's white supremacist, it's everything. I mean, you can't imagine such badness according to these NGO propagandists. But in spite of that badness, alleged badness, a record number of people are making the crossings from mainly Tunisia, but North Africa generally, but primarily Tunisia, from Tunisia to Italy, whether it's to Sicily or there's an Italian island just southeast of Sicily, try and land there, or indeed the mainland if they can get to it. So this is why is this sudden increase? Now, if you go through the globalist controlled media, they present it as the need for people to move from the third world to the first world, as refugees has never been greater, and it's because the mass of refugees, people fleeing persecution and poverty, so the NGOs allege, that mass of people has increased out of all proportion, and thus the amount of people making the journey has increased. So at the same time as they're saying the journey's never been more difficult, drownings have never been greater, and the difficulty in making the trip has never been greater, and that the treatment when the people arrive in Italy or elsewhere, could be Malta or somewhere, the treatment they're getting is so terrible. In spite of all these impediments and all this terribleness, more and more people are making the journey. That doesn't, of course, add up. If you know that your chances of getting to the other end are slim, that you've got a 20% chance of drowning, and you've got would you make the journey at all? Probably not. But we need to sort of work our way back through the process just to see who's pushing this and who's facilitating it, who's enabling it, and so on. So now I'm just looking at the media reports here where they're citing that the governments of Italy and Malta and so on are acting illegally. So the NGOs claim they're not citing any laws that are broken. They're just sort of citing this illegality. I've noticed that the globalists are very particular about the law when it suits them. When they want to force you to do something, the law matters. But when they are supposed to be accountable, then suddenly the law doesn't matter anymore. When they want something, then the law is irrelevant. When they're trying to get you to do something, then suddenly the law is important. And so they're very, very selective, the globalists, when it comes to their honouring and respecting of the law. So they mention continually that Italy's acting illegally and so on, but they cite no law that's being broken. Aren't the illegal aliens, aren't they acting illegally? If so, why should the Italian government be accountable to the law, but these illegal aliens not? Why should the people smugglers be allowed to ply their trade? Isn't that illegal? Well, why shouldn't that be an issue? But it isn't. It's only the only accountability is the Italian government is accountable. So they talk about the distress of these illegals. So they say these illegals are setting off with only some petroleum for their motorboat, the fuel, and they're running out of fuel halfway across the Mediterranean. Now, okay, well that's, if you need to travel X amount of distance and you've only got half the fuel to do it, then where should that responsibility lie? Now, according to the NGOs and the human rights groups, if any boat that leaves Tunisia or North African coast is unprepared in some way, there's not enough fuel or not enough water or something like that, then that instantly becomes the responsibility of the Italian government. These people are victims, and you have a responsibility to save them and rescue them and bring them ashore. Well, shouldn't the Italian government send these people back to Tunisia, where they came from? Isn't that the legal thing to do? No, that's what Hitler would do. You have to take them from the wherever they are in the Mediterranean Sea and take them to Italy. That's the only humane thing to do. And if you don't do it, you are fucking Hitler. It's that simple. So there's talk about now the way these articles, and there's a number of them. I couldn't find a single article that said the Italian government was acting sensibly and reasonably in sending these people back to Tunisia. That was treated as a flagrant abuse of human rights and so on. These people are refugees. You mustn't. But how do you know they're refugees? No one's determined that they're refugees at all. The vast majority of them will just be freeloaders, economic chances, and freeloaders. They won't be refugees. So why do they just have this blanket thing of refugees? And then they assert that majority of them are little children, little girls dressed in pink. Cue the photograph of a little girl dressed in pink. Little girls dressed in pink, and they're just wanting a better life, and you're trying to stop them. You fucking Nazi! So all the talk about it is people that are placing themselves in, engaging in very high risk behaviour and placing themselves in harm and danger, but somehow that's someone else's fault and responsibility. I mean, the thinking here and the mentality is just mind-boggling how they do. So they're talking. I mean, here's one here I'm looking at where the people set off, and this is during summer. Okay, so it's hot day, and you'll have a series of hot days. And they've set off with not enough fuel to get them even halfway across towards Italy or any other landfall. And they've taken no food and no water, and they've taken no shade. So these people are in the sun with no water now, but they've all got mobile phones. So as soon as they run out of fuel, they're on the mobile phones making distress calls saying we've got no fuel, we've got no water, we've got no food, and dehydration, sunstroke, etc. We're in distress. You have to come and rescue us. Now there's an Italian like a Coast Guard vessel turns up and tows these people back to Tunisia, but that's viewed by the NGOs and so on as an evilness that makes it's more evil even than Hitler. That's how evil that is. But wait a minute, you're taking them back to where they came from. If they're in distress, then take them back to where that's closer than Italy is at this time. So no. The only solution is to bring them to a first world country. So really, this has got nothing to do with illegality. It's got nothing to do with human rights. It's nothing to do with any of that. It's just part of the globalist mass migration program. That's all it is. Now, there are various NGOs that are quoted in the articles, all of which are insanely pro-mass migration, pro-illegal migration. No human being is illegal. Every imagined gender studies, lesbian type rationale is applied to this, so that only people that are supporting the illegals are good. Anyone that opposes it or questions it is Hitler, and that's the sort of the dividing line there. And there's not any attempt that should these people accept personal responsibility. No, of course not. And anyone that says that is Hitler. And so the only people that are being quoted and mentioned, and they're touted as being good and wonderful, and halos around them, are the pro-migration NGOs. So, somewhere like Malta, where they may be getting multiple calls for these boats in distress that have put themselves in a situation of distress, by the way. There's nothing natural or organic about the distress there, and they didn't leave the Tunisian coast well organised and well provisioned and so on. They left wanting to put themselves in a position of distress so they could make the emergency call and attempt to invoke maritime law that people should come to the aid of a vessel in distress. So now if a vessel's in distress, for example, it's in a storm or something, okay, fine. But to be in distress by putting yourself in distress deliberately in order to engineer a distress situation, so you can fabricate a distress situation so you can make a call. So they cite that the government of, say, Malta, as an example, is behaving illegally and and because the Maltese Coast Guard isn't getting to these vessels quickly enough. What? I mean, not only do they have to, rescue them, but they have to do it in they have to do it in quick, smart time, or else they're Nazis. What? I mean, all these articles are the same, and all these articles, by the way, are all globalist propaganda. None of them can justify or reasonably justify the mass migration of people, nor do they talk about it. They just say these people are refugees. Fact, they just assert it. These people are they're in a boat in distress. That's it. Fact, you have to rescue them. They have to go to a first world country. That's asserted. It has to be. No, there's no justification or rationale at all. Now they'll pick an anecdotal situation of little Umboko who has walked 1,000,000 miles a day just to go to school. He only wants a better life, and he's gay, and he's being persecuted, and he's a refugee, and and if you don't let little Umboko come into the first world country, then you are fucking Hitler. And those sort of stories, are thrown in there just for good measure. But it's the classic globalist propaganda to justify the unjustifiable. Let's come back now to the reality that more people are arriving in Italy than ever before, and the Italian courts, the government just seems unable to stop it or prevent it or to send these people back. So I don't know what's going on. Why is the Italian government so completely ineffective in this? Why are they not able to send these people back? Why do they not put them in detention centres and then mass deport them? Why they're not able to quickly ascertain if somebody's a refugee or not? It's very unlikely that if somebody's an illiterate rural peasant that they'll also be a refugee. That the likelihood of that is very, very slim. If they're, say, a government official that's fallen foul of the local government or something like that, maybe they haven't accepted a bribe or offered one, or didn't pay due respect to the tin pot dictator or something, maybe then you could see it. But for some rural peasant, their chances of being, you can have a look at situations like civil war, but then there are refugee camps close by, adjacent to the country that the United Nations and various groups are running. So people can go there. Their only choice in the world isn't the first world country. But the reality we're looking at here is in the globalist mass migration refugee scam that the NGOs, the globalist funded NGOs, are actively encouraging these illiterate peasants to make the journey and providing all the support infrastructure needed to do it, including in many cases transport across the Mediterranean. Where do you think these people get their boats and their bits and pieces from? They don't. It just doesn't fall out of the sky. Some NGO and various globalist funded people smugglers are providing all this infrastructure. These peasants couldn't do it on their own. They wouldn't even know what a rubber dinghy was. So they're getting all these things provided, and the globalists are investing vast sums in it to make it happen. And they're clearly succeeding. Well, how they're able to so easily overwhelm the Italian, the supposedly anti-illegal immigrationists, how they're so easily able to overwhelm them is quite beyond me. I haven't been able to find any media article that covers the details of why the government is so ineffective. Given the public announcements they've made that they're going to crack down on it. There are some other things I know is very interesting, is the amount of and they're picking and choosing, but the globalists have been funding legal cases. So they've got a supposed refugee was trying to get from some black African country to Tunisia to escape some sort of unnamed persecution. Then this guy tried to get to Italy. This is one of a number of examples, by the way. A guy tried to get to Italy illegally, and this particular trip was intercepted by the Italian Coast Guard, and they were towed back to Tunisia. Okay, fine. Now, then a legal case was launched against the Italian government. Went through the Italian courts. Now, how they were able to get it into the court so quickly, and again, how they were able to get a very sympathetic judge, and then it was appealed, and then another very sympathetic judge, and so on. That just can't be accident. That's got to be globalist deep state in operation there. So this illiterate black peasant whose case was taken up by a well cashed up globalist NGO, they launched a legal case in Italy on the basis that because the guy was taken back to Tunisia by the Italian Coast Guard, that if I've understood the case correctly, his legal rights had been or hadn't been fully recognised. So that therefore the Italian government was in breach of some international article and breached this dude's human rights. So now they managed to get the case into court. Again, you look at the waiting list of cases in Italian courts, and it's quite long. You don't get to hear a case in 5 minutes. It's quite long. So they get this, but somehow this NGO group they launch the case, and they get it heard quite quickly. A matter of weeks, they managed to get it into the court. They file documents, do all the bits and pieces. All the lawyers are provided. The globalist NGOs are paying for everything. The illiterate black peasant probably doesn't even understand what's going on anyway. It doesn't have to foot a penny for this. It wouldn't have been a legal case if the international NGOs weren't taking it up. So they get into the court, and they get a verdict in their favour that the guy's human rights have been abused or insufficiently considered. The Italian government appeals it and goes to the appeal court, and again the next judge that hears is also very sympathetic to the globalist program of mass migration, and the government loses the appeal. Now, they went through various administrative methods to sort of slow walk it. In one of these articles, the people were outraged that the evil Italian government, they don't care about the law. Wait, stop. Hold on a minute. What about these illegals? What about all the NGOs and the UN, the globalists that are illegally or are moving these peasants into Tunisia, then illegally moving them across the ocean, the Mediterranean Sea, and illegally bringing them? Why aren't they legally accountable? No, we're not legally accountable. It's them. The law only goes one way. We make them accountable to the law when it suits us. We're not accountable to the law because just because. You've been with Tacitus today, your pushback channel. Thank you for listening.